This is Heidi with your fire weather briefing for Eastern Area for the week of May 6th. We are at PL2 nationally and in Eastern Area. Southwest also is at PL2, while the Southern area is down from a 4 to a 3 this week. For temperature trends, we have the last couple of months here to take a look at, and as you can see, it's been quite warm through most of Eastern area, with the Ohio Valley having the warmest temperature anomalies. Meanwhile, up in the northwestern part of Minnesota, it's been a little bit cooler than normal for the month of April. For precipitation trends, March and April both had this pattern with very wet conditions over much of Michigan and along the north side of the Ohio Valley. That area shifted a little farther north for April and left a dry area over the Ohio Valley itself, all the way out to the East Coast and up into Maine. Meanwhile, over in Minnesota, you can see that March was quite dry for most of the state, and then there was some improvement with some more precipitation in that neck of the woods through the month of April, but it was still a little bit dry to the west. In the last 7 days, that dry pattern over Minnesota has reached over into the western side of Wisconsin as well, and down into Iowa. Otherwise, some pretty ample precipitation for most of the rest of Eastern area. For warnings, watches, and advisories, we've got very little action out there this morning other than some areas with a bit of flooding. We have seen some areas of the upper Midwest that had frost warnings out this morning, and that may be true for tomorrow as well, with another cold morning in store. For today, you can see in the maximum temperature graphic that there's going to be a colder air mass taking over most of the region today, and it's slowly working its way to the East Coast as well. With that, we see some pretty low humidities across much of the upper Midwest, reaching down into Iowa, even the northern part of Missouri today, and over into Illinois. Michigan has also gotten on the dry train with some lower relative humidities there. So even though there's going to be a little bit more cloud cover, these areas are still of elevated concern for today. Most of the rest of the eastern area is going to be on the wet side, and you can see where the precipitation is in the forecast for today, and it has just left the Ohio Valley in the last 24 hours. Maximum wind speeds are a little bit gusty out in parts of the Midwest, as well as along the East Coast, although it's really not going to be enough for me to decide to put a trigger on the significant fire potential graphic for today, as conditions will be a little bit more moderated there than they've been. Now let's keep an eye on that cold front from today to tomorrow. It moves off of our area of interest and takes most of the precipitation with it, leaving behind a mostly dry day across the eastern area. Temperatures are going to start to recover a little bit from the west, but still be kind of cool, especially through the northern tier. There is this very dry air mass, however, coming into the Midwest, with humidities expected to be down to around 20% or maybe even lower. So even though the winds aren't particularly strong out there, they're maybe a little higher over Iowa, I think the burn environment is going to be ripe for easy ignition and rapid fire spread should we see any fires start. So we're keeping conditions throughout the west on a higher status. Meanwhile, over in the east, even though we do see some lower humidities and an overall drying trend, I think it's going to take an extra day in order to dry out after the recent rainfall. Moving on to Friday, the air mass continues to warm a little bit, but still mostly 50s and 60s for much of the region. This very dry air mass does hold on over the upper Midwest, and that area of concern for burn environment, as well as winds right along the western side of Minnesota. Keep a trigger in here for Friday and actually expand the area of higher risk. Meanwhile, over in the east, enough drying is occurring that we do see elevated concern for many areas there. However, just keeping it with yellow, the lower risk end of things, as there has been a pretty good amount of rain over there just recently. And you can see on the 24-hour precip graphic that there is this chance for moisture moving through the Ohio Valley, but I think it's going to be pretty spotty for Friday. In the medium range, I've added the 7-day graphic for each of these so you can kind of see what I'm thinking as these systems move through. Now again, keep in mind on these big maps that the light green is just areas where there's a chance of rain, not heavy rain. But overall, conditions staying damper in the eastern and southern part of the region. So we really just keep this portion of the Midwest, particularly around the Great Lakes states, where we have higher concern, and I'm keeping either burn environment or windy conditions as a trigger for many of these areas throughout the week. Now, the next series of cold fronts move through over the weekend, and that's what brings the chance of showers for the south and the east. But overall, areas around the upper Midwest stay quite dry, and it's not till Tuesday where we see the first chance of getting any moisture into that area. And again, it's in that chance region more than anything solid. So I've dropped the triggers out for Tuesday, but fuels are still going to be pretty dry throughout the Midwest. Meanwhile, over in the east, for the most part, things will be very low. It does look like Tuesday has that chance for some drier conditions around the mid-Atlantic and over into West Virginia. My confidence overall in these models is reasonable. I definitely question the precipitation amounts on these smaller features that move through. For the week 2 outlook, it's definitely looking like a colder air mass will be in place for the 6 to 10 day time frame, but then that gets pushed off over to the northeast and warmer air starts to move back in from the west late in the period. Meanwhile, precipitation indicates that overall a wetter than normal pattern is in the forecast, though you can see that Minnesota avoids that area above normal until late in the period, and even then it's only in the 33 to 40% increased chance that it might happen. So still fairly close to equal chances there. For the monthly outlook here on the left, colder than normal is expected overall for May, but that's being driven by the first couple of weeks of this period. As we get to the end of the month, more normal temperatures are expected. And as we get to the June, July, August period, overall it looks like warmer than normal conditions are expected in the east, especially New England, while over the Midwest, it's equal chances of colder, warmer, or normal conditions. For precipitation, the month of May definitely looks to be drier in the west, and then after that, mostly equal chances as we get into the summer season. The fire potential outlook, which was published by Predictive Services on the 1st of May, does have some red on the map for eastern area, specifically Area 1 in the north and western part of Minnesota is expected to continue to be pretty busy through the month of May before returning to normal conditions in June, July, and August. This is being driven by drought conditions which have led to dry fuels, as well as a forecast where it just doesn't seem like any precipitation is easily working its way in. Taking a look at precipitation a little bit harder, again, we've got the last 7-day period of observed precipitation in the upper left, and you can see plenty of precip in most areas except over in Minnesota, into Wisconsin, and down into Iowa. It's also been a little bit drier in some of the mid-Atlantic states. Meanwhile, the forecast precip for the next 7 days keeps this same pattern with wetter conditions along the Ohio Valley up into the northeast, and then drier conditions throughout the upper Midwest. Today we do have this chance of thunderstorms moving through the east, but the severe risk has moved south of our region. For drought, we can take a look at the current drought monitor published last Thursday, which shows a lot of the same areas we've been talking about, specifically around Minnesota, and then the far southeasternmost part of Missouri, southern Illinois, and then reaching over into West Virginia and up the mid-Atlantic and into the northeast. Now, over on the left, we've got where we've been. So the upper left is a year ago at this time, and then the lower left is about 3 months ago. And you can see, interestingly, that in Minnesota, conditions were worse for drought last year at this time. So though we're a little bit better off, we're still seeing quite a bit of fire activity in that area. Meanwhile, the drought that had been pretty severe this winter from Missouri over into northwestern Ohio has abated quite a bit, and actually that band of concern has moved farther south of the Ohio drainage. Over in New England, conditions have improved throughout much of New York and eastern Pennsylvania, but we still see western Pennsylvania along the east coast up towards Maine as having some higher potential, and West Virginia has climbed on the dry train in the last few months as well. Down in the lower right, we've got the outlook for drought for the next month, and these dark areas say that drought persists. So we can expect to see conditions in West Virginia and over into the mid-Atlantic stay the same. There is some improvement expected around parts of Maine, while over in the west, Not much change for Minnesota. The Great Lakes Fire and Fuels webpage shows the initial spread index is staying pretty elevated for the next 4 days, with an increasing trend as we get into Friday and Saturday, and that area expands to include more of Wisconsin in this very high range. ISI is an index that tracks spread potential, so this is indicating that winds and very dry fuels will combine to create some pretty high spread potential by Saturday afternoon. Taking a look at our fuels, we've got the ERCs in the upper left that were observed for yesterday. And then in the lower right, what's forecast for today. The arrows indicate the trend for the last few days or the trend forecasted for the next few days. And you can see that though there's been some softening up in the northwest, there is now this upward trend happening for much of Minnesota. So again, though we don't have wind in the forecast for today, it does look like we're back on the upswing for much of the upper Midwest. While in New England and down in the Mid-Atlantic, conditions are softening just a bit. Meanwhile, the NASA green vegetation fraction shows that there's been quite a bit of green up. Everything looks good. Down to the south in Missouri and along the Ohio Valley, we're seeing more green shades throughout the Northeast. But it's just not picking up much green for Minnesota, even down into northern Iowa. The northern parts of Wisconsin and Michigan are also slow to green up. It's happening, just not very quickly. So to wrap things up, we've got fire potential more moderate across the upper Midwest today without any big triggers in store. Then conditions are lowering in the east today with the precipitation that's moved through recently. Conditions there will dry out again on Friday and then relax again for the weekend. Meanwhile, the Ohio Valley and overall the East Coast are going to be moderate through early next week. The upper Midwest continues to be the area of biggest concern for the next 7 days, with Minnesota in particular being the areas with the greatest potential because of the drought, the downed fuels that are there, the slow green up, and the dry weather that's in the forecast. That concludes this week's Fire Weather Briefing. Thanks for listening, and have a great and safe week.